This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Eileen Santos. Welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate you.
We want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see that icon up there. It says listen on Newsly. After the podcast, we will be available on audio on the Newsly platform as a featured podcast on their platform. Use coupon code GHOST to get 1 month free premium subscription so you can stop scrolling and start listening. Again, Phantom Electric Ghost is a featured podcast on Newsly. And again, thank you for being on the program. This is actually episode, I believe, 923 of the podcast. We've been on Apple Podcasts since 2016. This is episode 923. And we're going to talk about, in this episode, thriving and surviving after abuse.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thriving and surviving after an abusive relationship.
So
Great.
you have a BA in criminology from John Jay, and you've been immersed in the crime community since age 5, based on your information, your bio, and you've been passionate about topics of true crime and been an educator and a survivor on AR. And we have your link below. We'll let people know on the audio podcast that it's like sites.libsyn.com/413-645/site. So yeah, we want to talk to you about your abusive relationship, how you want to talk about how it's affected you and what you've been able to do to overcome it, and why did you get into podcasting? So maybe we start with the beginning.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring it back to the genesis. First and foremost, I'm Eileen Santos, and I speak about it on my podcast, which is Murder, Blood, and Psychopaths. And I remember I got into this abusive relationship when I was about 17, going into 18. I was graduating high school, and this wasn't something that my parents modeled. Like, this wasn't something that I grew up seeing. My mom was never abused, and I didn't see this growing up. So it wasn't something that was modeled in my
Hmm.
home. My mom was married to my father, so they had a wholesome relationship for the most part. And I remember when I was about 17 years old, I needed a job. I had to pay for my prom and my graduation. And I remember I got a job at McDonald's. And I remember I was turning 18. It was the summer. And I was excited because I had a summer job and I'm going into college. So I definitely needed the money for college. And I remember I was going to Monroe College to study criminal psychology. And then I met this gentleman, and his name was Nathan. And that's not his real name, by the way, but Nathan for the sake of an argument. I met him and I was older than him by a few months. And I remember him and we got to talking. I really liked this gentleman, and the red flags, they weren't quite there just yet. And then I remember we were young. Then we started this summer romance. And I remember for the very first time, I started to feel like he was like suffocating me
Hmm.
because he stopped working at McDonald's. I should have known that was a red sign. Couldn't keep a job. And the thing is that I didn't look at that as me to leave. But then he told me that he got another job. So I was excited for him, and we started this whole summer romance, and he would pick me up at my job like at night to make sure that I was going home. But it got to the point that it just felt like it was just unsolicited at times, and it felt like he was just stalking me. And finally, when a coworker brought it up to my attention, and he was like, Eileen, that's not normal. Like, he's calling the job, and you guys only been talking since like July, and we are still like maybe like almost going into August, and this shouldn't happen. And especially if this is a new person. And to me, I'm young. I didn't think of it in that way because my supposedly guy that I really liked, Nathan, he told me, "Oh, that guy just likes you." And he was just sort of like making sense, at least to me. So I'm like, "Oh, probably that's what it was." And then it gradually started where it was like the verbal abuse. And he started isolating me from family and friends. He started speaking ill about my best friend. I had this best friend that we were like inseparable. And he just told me, "Oh, she's pregnant." Like he started demonizing her. Like you don't want to surround yourself with someone like that. And he used a lot of religion because here he is a Christian man. And he used religion to punish
Mhm.
me. And he's like, "Oh, God would be disappointed in you if you hung out with people like them." So he really started eating at my brain. And I'm a person that I'm smart. I got into it, and I can't tell you how, right? And it started that way, and I started listening to him. And then it just one day everything culminated. And in my lobby, one day we actually made plans to go out to eat. And we met downstairs, and I remember something was going on with my hair, and he didn't like something about my hair. And I remember that was the first time I got
Mhm.
punched. He soccer punched me in the lobby of my building.
Wow.
And I remember going like, "Oh my god, like I didn't know how to feel." Like I felt like
Wrong, you know?
this never happened to me. I didn't know how to
Yeah.
react. So to me, it was like it was a shock. Yeah, it was a shock. And I remember going to myself like, "Okay, this is not normal." But then again, he started apologizing to me, and he started like, "Oh my god, like I'm sorry, honey. Like I'm sorry I did that to you. You made me lose
Mhm.
control." And you know what's crazy is that I really started to believe that it was
Oh,
my
so he put it
fault.
on you? He was
And
trying
I never told my
so he
mom, and I thought,
so I guess I was trying to ask, he kinda
"Wh
put it on you.
what was that?" I'm so
What I'm
sorry.
saying is he put the blame on you for his own action,
Yeah, he put it
and
on
then
me.
you didn't think to maybe call the police or do anything because
Yeah,
then he was playing with your head. So he kinda put it on you, which is the tendency of
yeah,
abusers is them anything that happens is your fault. So then they try to, keep you from putting it on them.
yeah. Exactly. You know, they deflect, and then it's like it doesn't matter if you're smart. Like it really abusive relationships, they don't discriminate. Like you can be the smartest person, have a high
Mhm,
IQ, and you can be even like if not physically abused, like you have the financial abuse, and then you have like to me what was more detrimental was never really like him putting his hands on me. Like it was never the physical, it was the emotional.
yeah,
And it was just
psychological.
a lot of things that he would tell me, like, "Oh, you're stupid." And these, yeah, it's really psychological. And I couldn't even uphold a conversation because he's like, "Oh, look at you, you're dumb." And it would just like, like, it would make me feel like really small. And I really started to believe
Mhm,
it. And this wasn't something that I wanted to share with my family because I was
mhm,
ashamed. I was really ashamed to even, I never knew how to even ask for help. And I remember like my mom never even knew that I was in an abusive relationship until one day I came with
mhm,
bruises on me, and I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't explain it. And I had to tell my mom, like, "Mom," like, and I was crying. I was like, "I'm in this relationship and he abuses me and this is what he does." And my mom, like, of course she was upset with me, but she was trying to like do what moms do. And my mom really tried to protect
mhm,
me. But it was just, even though he was like horrible to me, I still felt like he still had these like trauma bonding experiences where like you have these unhealthy
mm,
like these unhealthy boundaries and attachments with your
yeah,
abuser.
codependency.
And even though they're abusing you, they have these like crumbs that they leave where they treat you nice. And you tend to fixate on the nice
Mhm,
because you're like, "Wow, like I love when he's nice to me and I love when he's sweet." And your mind tends to like rationalize and keep you there. And it's only like buttering you up for the next
did
abuse.
you feel like you could
And
fix
it didn't matter what I did. It didn't matter. Like,
did you feel like you could fix
yeah.
what was wrong, that you saw some good in him and you thought you could fix it, or you were kind of fixated on maybe the problem was you and you kept on thinking, "Well, I can get better, and then he won't do this anymore."
I think it was both. Like I felt like as women, like we have like a bad habit of trying to fix men, and fix was broken. And especially me, it was my first relationship. This was someone I lost my virginity to. And I'm thinking, holy shit, like maybe I can fix him. And maybe it is my fault. But then I will also have like these moments where like I felt like it isn't your fault, because there will be times where I really didn't do anything. Like we would just be walking in the streets and he would hit me because he's like, "Oh, this person is staring at you. Oh, you like this person." And he would like taunt me. And it was just like one of those like abuse that you wanted it to end, but you just didn't know how to get out of it. And I was really young. I was 18
Mhm.
and he was my first boyfriend. So of course I'm like, maybe I can fix him. And I got pregnant thinking that I can fix
Oh,
him.
wow.
You know, it happened, got pregnant. Yeah, I was happy because I was gonna be a mom. And I thought to myself, like, maybe this abuse is gonna end once I become pregnant. And I was mistaken. It didn't abuse, like the abuse didn't get better. It got worse.
Mhm.
It got worse. And he hit me when I was pregnant. One time we were supposed to go out to eat. And when you're pregnant, like especially me, I didn't want to do my hair. Like I didn't. I was being like I wanted to be lazy. Like I wanted to just go out in
Mhm.
sweats, have my hair in a bun. Like I'm hungry. And I remember when he's like, "Oh, you're gonna go out like that," and I go, "Yeah, like what's wrong?" And he's like, "Well, we're not going out like that. Like fix your hair." And I'm like, "Dude, like my hair is in a bun, and there's not much I can do with my hair." And I remember he grabbed the brush and he tried to like comb my hair, and he punched me. And I remember I went like this and I was on the floor. I was in fetal position because I was already like, I want to say like 4 or 5 months I was showing. And I remember I was in a fetal position in the bathroom and he was like over me. And he was yelling at me. And I can't remember the things that he was saying. And I remember like it stopped. And all of a sudden, I remember I'm praying to God. I'm like, God, please, like, let this end. He comes back with a knife and he puts it to me and to my stomach. And he says these like words to me, and he's like, it's you or him. And he's like getting really graphic. And he tells me, and this is like a warning if you guys don't want to hear this, but he told me this as I'm on the floor because I'm in pain. And he's like, don't if you don't get up from this floor, do not make me stomp this baby out of you and crush his skull. I remember he said in those words. And I remember thinking like this is horrible because you just found out that we were having a boy, right? And you were happy that we were having a boy. It's your first kid. I'm gonna be a first time mom. And I just remember saying, like, God, this can't be my life. This can't be my life. And it doesn't get better. The abuse just got worse. And of course, my mom, like, she urged me to leave the relationship. And I was always trying because I'm like, I'm having a kid with this man. And I never wanted to leave my kid without a father. But again, this is me putting it on myself, not acknowledging my trauma and just always acknowledging him and putting him forward. And it just, like I said, things just got worse. It didn't get better. And eventually I didn't keep the baby. I lost the baby. My son, my son was eventually born like 6 months after. The baby was born prematurely. And in the hospital, they had to keep me under observation because the night that him and I had a bad argument, I remember like my water ruptured.
Mhm.
And I remember fluid coming down, and I'm like, it's too early for me to give birth. And like I said, I'm a first time mom. I don't know what this means. And my mom, I remember I'm calling her, and my mom is a school teacher, and I'm panicking because water's coming down and it doesn't have a good smell. And I'm like, "Hey mom, there's something's wrong with me. Like I'm feeling wet and I already showered. Like I don't know what's going on." And my mom was like, "Oh my god, like call the ambulance because you're going into labor. Like your thing broke." And I was like, "My water broke." And I'm like, "I'm only 6 months." Okay, so I call, they get me hospitalized, they get me with the IV. And the physicians are telling me we need to keep you. um it's too early for your baby to come, so we have to keep you in the hospital because we have to now prolong the pregnancy. And doctors did what they could, honestly. And I had nurses that knew what was going on, urging me like, don't let this man into your room. He's going to bring you and your baby harm. And they gave me services for me to go to like shelters for women that were in abusive relationships like this. And of course, again, this is me trying to see the good in him. And what happened next is he came into my hospital room, and I remember he got angry with me because I was reading a Dan Brown book, Angels and Demons. And remember, he's Christian, and this goes against his belief. So he went in the room, he was furious and angry with me. And I remember he grabbed my book, threw it across the room. And I remember in the hospital room with security outside and nurses and everyone, he hit me. And I remember just screaming, and the nurses came and security came and they escorted him out. And I remember the very next day I was having bad contractions, and they told me like the baby is coming, and they were monitoring everything, and they're like, the baby's coming. And I remember I had to have an emergency C-section. And unfortunately, he was there, of course, again, right? He was there. He saw the birth of the baby. The baby was born. The baby was healthy for the most part. And the thing is that I was able to name my son. His name was Josiah, named him after the Bible. And 16 days after, because he was premature, his lungs didn't develop, so my son ended up not making it. And I remember being angry and mad at God, because I'm like, why would you do this? And years later I understood that it needed to be done, because I was never going to leave this man. And it's unfortunate, but I'm healed. This is something I could talk about. I've been going to therapy. And I'm what gonna be 35 in September. And this is something that I can talk about. And I'm okay saying that I know the reason why, and it had to happen, because like I said, I wasn't gonna leave this man. And God knows that I didn't want my son to think that it was okay to act like this towards not only women but like men, or just women. And I never wanted my kid to grow up thinking that this was okay behavior. And I finally understood it. But like I said, it took time. It happened gradually. I was with him maybe for 2 years, and that was the last straw. That was the time that I was like, you know what, enough was enough. And I decided to end the relationship. And I would love to tell you that it ended there, but it didn't end there, because the last time I saw him, he tried to kill me. And I remember he came to my house. My son had already passed away, and he tried to leverage like a meetup with him and I, because he's like, "Oh, I got Josiah's death certificate," and he knew what that meant to me, and I wanted that. So of course I'm like, "Okay, you can come bring it at my mom's house." And I gave him the chance to come to my mom's house to bring me the death certificate, and I let him come in. And as I'm opening the door, he grabbed me and he choked me. And I remember running to my room, and I remember I'm in bed, and he follows me. He's like running after me. And I remember his grip getting strong, like on my neck. And I remember just all the images flashing right in my, like right before my eyes. And I thought that was a myth, but it really happens. And I remember just seeing everything, and I remember asking God, like, is this how my life is gonna be? Am I supposed to die here? Like, but I felt like something was telling me, you have to fight. You have to fight. This is not where you die. And I remember his grip got like as I'm losing like oxygen and I couldn't breathe. I remember his grip was loosened, and I remember like, I can get out. I can get out. And I don't know how I made it to the phone, and I was able to make a phone call to my mom, because my mom lived like 2 blocks away. And I'm like, "Mom, call 911. He's here. He's trying to kill me." And I remember he didn't even chase me. He was in my room and he was just frozen. And we didn't say anything. And my mom came rushing. And the only thing I remember was he rushed right past her. And I think I saw him one other time. And that was the last time I've ever saw him again. He's trying to make contact with me on social media, trying to be a horrible person. But I didn't let it get to me because I'm like, you know what? My faith is strong. I'm stronger now, and his abuse doesn't do anything to me right now. And literally, I became a school teacher and I went to John Jay, got my bachelor's in criminal psychology. I was able to make it to the dean's list. I had a daughter 2 years after, not with him, and I was able to pick up my life and deal with the trauma. I didn't go into therapy shortly after. It took me a long time to get into therapy. I want to say 3 years. I've been into therapy now and it's the best thing I've done. And I've also been on a spiritual healing. And I'm here to tell you guys, like, this is my testimony. And if you guys want to listen to more, you guys can listen to it on my podcast because a lot of more things happen. But, um, that's my testimony for you guys. And, we can all move from abusive relationships. We don't need to stay there, guys. Like, we can pick up the pieces, and you can, sometimes family, they're there to support you, and sometimes some people, you become overwhelmed with, I guess, like, people that's never dealt with that, and they judge you. And a lot of people leave your side because it happened. A lot of people left my side, but it's not something that I blame people for doing. It's not something that I ever judged anyone for doing, because I understand, this was something I needed to do on my own. And with the grace of God, I was able to do it, to thrive, and to get up and leave. And this is my story, guys.
I think a lot of people need to have empathy because I think there's a problem with a lack of empathy for a lot of people, and the thing is that's very interesting that he was claiming that he was a Christian and doing very unchristian, like, evil things, to treat the mother of your child and beat her and probably cause the situation with your child being born early. It's all like his fault. It's nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what he was doing. And that, yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it just seems like totally what you see in this world. You see a lot of like abusive relationships, like at a microcosm level, like individuals, right? And then you see general society at a macrocosm not understanding. Police officers not giving support to domestic violence and abusive relationships, like coming to a call and then allowing the abuser to still be there, right? Not supporting people by giving them the resources they
oh yeah.
need, not making it easy for you to try to report it, and sympathizing with their abuser. There's a lot of things going on where people you know that are abusers. People say, well, they should still have a right to have a gun. Like, why? Why would you give somebody that does violence the right to have a gun? They could end up killing somebody. You know, there's no sensitivity. And so what I try to bring to the show
Exactly.
is people need to have some empathy and listen to what your story is and not just have some kind of judgment. You need to hear what you just said. For the last 20 minutes, you've talked, testified to your situation. And I think people need to look at that. And then if they can't understand that, they can't have empathy, there's something wrong with society.
Yeah, because it's like, even having this conversation, you would think that, like, the laws improved and things like that. And it's like, don't get me wrong, like, of course, we've at least we're making some waves and we're having a conversation, because before it was like something that was a spousal. And I remember I covered an episode with this woman. Her name was Francine Hughes, and she lived this abuse in the 70s and the 80s, and her husband abused her, and the system never protected her. She Law enforcement, and they literally, like, left this man into the apartment, because they're like, well, this just stay between a
Mhm.
spouse. And the reason it got attention is because she burned the bed he was in, and I don't think her intention was to murder him, but enough is
Yeah.
enough. Like, and I've gotten to that point where I also thought of also killing him. But this was something about me. I was like, well, I'm a woman of color. This is New York City. There is no stand your ground
Yeah.
or self
Yeah.
defense. And it's like, I know I would go behind bars.
No,
Yeah.
no support.
So this woman, as she's experiencing this abuse, right, and there was no support, and I remember like this woman, like she ended up killing her husband. There was a whole trial, and she had an amazing lawyer that advocated for her. And they're like, there's a lot of women with stories like yours. You need to tell your story because it is not
Mhm.
unique, right? There's a lot of women that are being abused and it should never be behind closed doors. Like, we need help. Like, this is a real problem. And when she got on the stand to tell her story, it was like everyone had empathy. Everyone was like, wow, like this man, like just the abuse and everything that he did to her. I was like, I know where she's coming from, because many times you can be eating and it's just like anything can trigger this
Mhm.
person and they can just hit you. They can throw something at you. And it's like, it's just so like demeaning to you. I remember for a long time I couldn't smile. Like, I had this tooth right here from so many blows, like turned black. I had pictures. I think maybe 2, 3 years ago is when I decided to fix my smile, because for a long time I couldn't
Mhm.
smile because I kept trying to protect my pregnancy. And people were mean about it online. They're like, oh, you should fix your smile. Like, it looks ugly when you smile. And to me, it was like, this was me, like a marker in my, like on me, a reminder that I didn't fully protect my son how I should have. And this was just something that stood like as a reminder to me. And it wasn't easy. It was never easy, but people can be mean. And even if you don't understand it, there's many times where people say, oh, that could never be me. Oh, if I was in this
Yeah,
situation.
you never know.
Nuh-uh.
I mean, how people
It's you freeze when it's
you
you.
never know because, like, the chemistry between people, you could
Yeah,
assume because you never met that person, right? That no one could
yeah,
ever affect you in such a way that you could
yeah,
end up being in a codependent relationship, right? That you could end up in an abusive relationship. You could end up with a narcissist,
yeah,
right? Like an abusive narcissist. And you could get tied
yeah,
into it
and
because, you know, what people don't believe, like look at Jonestown. I mean, look at the Heaven's Gate. People get who were PhDs
yeah,
got pulled into Jonestown. People with MBAs,
yeah,
people got the PhD, they get pulled into
yeah,
cults because there's this narcissistic leader
yeah,
that can actually disarm you. And so there's a lot
yeah,
of psychology, there's a lot of sociology that
yeah,
until you meet that person, you have no idea how you might respond. So it's very, people have to be more empathetic, in my opinion, and it's why I do this show because I've talked to a lot of people that have stories about being in abusive relationships or dealing with narcissists. And, a lot of times there's like victim blaming. And in society today, there's a lot of victim blaming. There's a lot of people that are trying to roll things back
oh yeah,
to where they felt comfortable. And there's a lot of bullies that are bullying different
of
groups.
course.
They're bullying women, taking
Hmm.
women's rights away, bullying minorities, taking minorities' rights away, to the point where, eventually there's this case in front of
Yeah,
the Supreme Court that says the government took away the right for a domestic violence abuser to have a gun. And because some people think the gun is so important, they think that he should give the gun back to that person because they think the gun is more important than somebody's safety.
no,
And that's where the world is today. We got a bunch of bullies
right.
who are trying to force things to go back to the 1940s. And so people need to be aware
Oh yeah,
there are people who don't empathize, that want to scapegoat, want to gaslight, want to not care. And but for all those people that do that, there are people who do care
yeah.
and do want to hear and do want to be advocates and want to know how they can help people who are in that kind of situation.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I felt like, cuz this is why I really like started the podcast, because I'm like, wow, like my story, I know it's not unique. But my story is unique to me, and I wanted to give people the chance of like to to tell us about what it looked like, because everyone's abusive relationships are very different. And I literally I've covered like other people's abusive relationships that honestly they didn't get to live to tell it, and their family members, honestly, you become a martyr to your cause. And I've seen family members advocate for better laws. And I'm like, wow, there's always like at least a little bit of lightning at the ending of the tunnel, you know? But I'm really fortunate, honestly, to tell my story, because many people don't survive.
Hmm.
And it's like, even if you don't understand it, like, try not to be mean to someone else's story. Like, honestly, if it's fine, like you may have never been in an abusive relationship, it's okay. Like I said, this wasn't something that was modeled in my home. Like I didn't grow up seeing this, you know. My mom, she was married to my father, and my mom, even as my dad and her, they got a divorce, my mom never allowed any partner to give her any BS. If anything, my mom would probably scare the guys away, because my mother was like a no
Yeah.
nonsense. But my mom really did, like, she helped me. And my mom, like, as and she gave me the tough love because I'm Latina. My mother was like, "Oh, you stupid, you keep going back." But I understood that my mom had tough love. So I had to
Hmm.
understand that this was my mother loving me. As horrible as that is, like she's calling me like dumb and this, that, and the third, is like my mom never wanted me to get into this relationship. My mom had high hopes. My mom was like, "You're gonna go to college." My aunt, she went to Harvard Law School, and my mom was like, "You're like her." Like, and my mom knew. My mom was like, "You're a college girl. Like, you keep your head in the books. Like, how did you even manage to get into something like this?" And I'm like, "Mom, I can't tell you. I just really can't tell you how it happened. It just did." You know, but I'm alive. And it's just something that I tell people, like, please, if your friend is in one, hold this person's hand. They don't mean to keep going back.
Yeah.
They don't. But the more you put, like, what we don't understand is that the person that they have, if you leave their side, what who else is going to help them with their escape plan? Like, they need you. And I understand it's frustrating because your friend keeps going back to this a-hole, but they don't mean to just stay there. I promise you, they need that support. And eventually something's going to click and they're going to leave, you know? And
Yeah.
that's what happened. And I was able to rekindle my friendship with my best friend because my best friend had her family. And I understand, like, my best friend, she was amazing. And she was like my therapist after I got out of the relationship. And I found healing. I found some kind of healing, you know?
Well, I think
So
what's
be there for your
really
friends
hard is,
and
there's
family.
a lot of people, they have all these judgments. When I was in college, I actually worked at a legal defense fund clinic that actually did protection orders for women in domestic violence situations. And we had to be very understanding because we get a call from somebody saying they want the protection order, and then, like, the next day
Yeah.
or even a couple hours later, they'd try to revoke it because they were in that kind of. We'd see the kind of up and down. Because we were working in the place trying to help people, and we could
Yeah.
see, and we couldn't judge. We didn't judge if somebody
Yeah.
comes calls back and said they want to remove it, but we would still try to keep them on the line to convince them to keep it, right? Because we were trying to be advocates to understand
Yeah.
and not go and say, well, they're, what are you doing? Not start yelling at them, but learn how to understand the situation they're in. And it's a very complex psychological situation where people have a lot of things
Yeah.
that can put themselves in that situation. When you just understand the psychology of it, you can have issues when you were younger, that you had truths, you had beliefs that you thought were true. Somebody could have told you were not going to be anything, or you could feel like insecure. And then the person who's like the narcissist can deal with that insecurity in a very manipulative way. And so they hit all the pressure points in the right way, and they kind of keep you there. And until you have somebody that understands what's going on, you got to
Oh,
have people who can try to help you with protection orders or help you get to the shelters. And we try to get people into shelters, and then they book themselves out of the shelter. And so it's like every week we'd have to deal with the kind of back and forth.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'd have a success story where somebody got all the way out, but a lot of times they kept on going back and forth.
Oh my god. Yeah. And I can honestly speaking on that, like that was me. Like I would literally like put like order of protection against him and then I'll drop it. But you know where my headspace was is a lot of times these guys they know where your family lives, so they can threaten you, and sometimes a lot of times if you have kids with them they can threaten your kids, they can threaten your family, so many times they can mentally like keep you
Hmm.
there. So this is why like that was me all day, like going to the police department, getting my order of protection. He'll get arrested, then I'll drop it, trying to be understanding, but he was like he kept me there mentally, like fuck. It was just
Hmm.
like, oh, I know where your sister lives, I'll make sure to do this. So it and trust me, I had like some law enforcement that thank god like they will be understanding and they'll tell me like it's not gonna change, but I was only 18.
Hmm.
Like I'm a teenager, this was my
It's hard.
first
It's hard.
relationship, so
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
right. And I like battered women syndrome is
Yeah. It's a real
real,
thing.
and he kept me there, and it was just like it's a real thing. Like it really is. It's not made up. And unless you're in that situation, that's the only way you'll know. And if you love this person, you think that you're gonna save them. You're like, you think that the love that you have for this person is gonna be enough to change them. It never is. Not kids,
Oh, another
nothing.
mean,
There's
you were
nothing.
pregnant and he was
Ain't
still
but
attacking you, so the kind of the kind of consideration of like most men, if they're gonna be a decent man, you're not supposed to ever hit a woman, and if your woman's pregnant, why would you ever hit her? You're
of
supposed to
course.
defend her. So that right there is broken in this person. They've got a
Exactly.
broken concept,
Oh,
and they're doing all this. They probably hate themselves, but instead of killing themselves, they
yeah.
do all this outward attacking, you know, and it usually they're self-destructive, but a
Yeah.
lot of times they take other people with them. And so they in some cases, like
Oh yeah.
you see all this outward attacking of other people, but they're doing self-destructive stuff already because of they're in this narcissistic, really dangerous place. And you want to probably try to help them because you see they're in pain. You can probably see the pain that's in that person, but they're just toxic. It's just hard to deal with
Of
somebody that's
course.
toxic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like and you know what's the crazy part is his father was an amazing person. Like his father, if anything, told me to get out of the relationship. He's like, listen, my son does drugs. He's not good for you. And he steals. Like his father told me. He even had a stepmom because his mother passed away. And I was trying to be understanding, like, oh, your mom passed away. Like, I'm sorry. I also lost someone. But I lost my aunt to murder. And I think his mom, I believe, I don't know if she had like a heart attack. She was young. And I felt like maybe I'm here to maybe help him heal. Maybe we can heal each other. I lost someone and you lost your mom,
Hmm.
but that's the thing. It wasn't, it was I was mistaken. And his brother, he had a brother. His brother did not share these ideologies. No one did. It was him.
Hmm.
And I was just like so shocked. Like, how is it that your father's not this way, or even your other brothers and sisters, they're not this way, but you turned out this way. But
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
People's,
And everyone grew up in the same household,
yeah,
so everyone almost had the same
yeah, the
upbringing.
trajectory of where people
Yeah.
go, within a family, this is where people get, because a lot of times in domestic violence or abusive relationships, it can be the father on the kid or the uncle or the grandparent or somebody, and people can be in the structure and they think everything's fine, and there's all this stuff happening, and so there are people that have masks or they seem to be one thing or they're not that thing, or you can't really predict from the whole structure of the family that everybody's going to be the same way, but some people make assumptions. So, well, this is a good family, and then somebody gets
Exactly.
stuck in an abusive relationship
Right.
because this person's a
Right.
respected person, so then no one's ever going to touch them because they're respected, or they can't conceive they could ever do that, and so then you
Right.
don't get any help. because they're putting out
Right.
this outward vibe. Oh, that can't be, and then you're suffering.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's like even with him, like I remember like he even reached out to me. I know like eventually he left me alone. Thank God. He left me alone and he was in a relationship. He had a son and a daughter, I believe, and he named my son the same name as our son Josiah. And I remember me personally, like I remember I let everything go and I remember just even praying for him and healing for him. And I remember he like sent like a picture via Instagram of like a time like when him and I were like together. And I'm like, dude, like I'm in my 30s. Like this was a picture of like you abusing me. Like, and then the caption was like, oh yeah, these were the best times of my life. And I'm like, what?
Really?
And then I'm like, well, that's when I like cursed him out. And then he's like, you know what he told me? Oh, he was like, "Oh, well, the woman I was with, she didn't deserve like I never hit her. I only hit you because you deserved it." Like he was telling me these things as I believe I was even pregnant with my daughter and he's telling me these things. And my best friend was like, "Oh, you better light that mother effer up." And I did. I remember I was on the phone giving him a piece of my mind because I was like, "Oh, you're not going to hurt my feelings." And I remember just telling him how I felt. And I remember like a weight was lifted because I told him everything and he was quiet. He took everything that I told him. I was like, you were a piece of shit. Like what you did to me, like all the abuse and everything. Like I even forgot what I told him, but I know like I gave him a piece of my mind. And I remember feeling proud of me. I remember even my best friend was proud of me. She's like, wow, like I'm proud of you because you told them how you felt. Even though like after a while I had a guilty conscience because I'm like, maybe this is not what God wanted me to do, but still. This was just me,
Well, I mean,
I had to let
I
it
think you
go.
need to get everything out when you can. A lot of people say, if you keep things in, then it doesn't help you. Like in order to get past something, that you kind of got to deal with everything that's kind of welling up inside. So eventually, you have to kind of address that. And if you ever get to, face somebody like that, telling them something that's probably not a bad thing, as long as you can protect yourself and they don't come at you again. But the whole idea of thriving after trauma. I mean, your success story with that you were able to get out of it. Like a lot of in your podcast, you talk about where you speak for people who didn't get out of it. So about thriving after the trauma, can you talk more about what things you did besides doing going to college and doing the podcast, and maybe talk more about the podcast? Because I'm interested in what you do with every episode for that.
Yeah. So sure. So everything after like my abusive relationship, it was just I know I needed to go to school. I got pregnant 2 years after. So I was like I need to be someone who my daughter is going to look up to. I need to be a role model. I was working in bars trying to win easy money and I'm like, "Well, I'm pregnant. I need something sustainable." So I'm like, "You know what? My daughter gave me that direction that I didn't have, and that was going to school." So going to school, I got an associate's in criminal justice, and then I went to John Jay and got my BA in criminology. And then even then, like I remember doing like public service, like working in nonprofits because I was always trying to help people with traumatic brain injuries, with OPWDDs, which is people with developmental disabilities. I work for an agency. And I remember like all of this was giving me a purpose. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do this all of my life. Like, I want to do something more. And I remember when the pandemic hit, I lost my job and I worked for the DOE and I was like, which is the Department of Education. So I was like, let me see if teaching is something I want to do. And surprisingly, guys, teaching, I thrive in what's teaching and counseling. I feel like I thrive.
Mhm.
And then I remember just starting a different path. And then don't get me wrong, I got into like shitty relationships after. And I was like, you know what, Eileen? You're in your 30s. You have no more excuses. Like, what are you going to do? And I'm a person that I self reflect. So I'm like, okay, I need a therapist. So I remember I
Mhm.
was like, I want a therapist. And I was like, I also need spiritual healing. And I remember praying to God and I'm like, I need a therapist. And I remember I had a list of providers and his name came up. His name is Freddie Baez. And I was like, this is my guy. And let me tell you, like, I like during this recovery, I honestly can tell you guys, like, there's tools in therapy that I didn't have. I was always a person that I never really fully knew how to get my emotions out. And as a Latina, parents, they kind of you kind of had to repress a lot of it because they're like, "Oh, you're so emotional." And at least my family, they didn't believe in
Mhm.
therapy. Okay, my family does not believe in therapy. They believe you're not broken. You're not broken. And I'm like, no, I need this. So I remember doing the spiritual and having my therapist now for 3 years. And this is what the road looks like to healing and thriving and even surviving.
Mhm.
And then my podcast is going to be now a year. And now for the 4th of July. And I remember I'm like, I want something better for my life. And this I was like, you're meant to help liberate people in bondages, right? You're supposed to talk about your story, let it out, let it out. And that's what this mic is here for. And I'm like, you know what, let me just tell people that I'm a survivor, I'm here, and this is what it looks like. I'm healthy. I've even started working out, like 13 years ago I was working out. And these are things that I do to make myself feel and just heal
Yeah.
from my abusive relationship. And God in my life, honestly, to me, like, God has done amazing things in my life, honestly. And that's just where
Well,
I'm
you're
at.
smiling a lot now. I see you smiling, so that makes you can see you're happy. And, podcasting for me has been a great thing. It's
Yeah.
opened up, communication with people all over the
Yeah.
world. And what I like about it is people can take a platform and they can really dive into
Mhm.
it. In a world where people get like a 30-second TikTok and they get the reel and they get the short, the podcast allows you to dive
Yeah.
into stuff in a world where people say that you can't do that. Where we live in a world where I'm a musician, where we have songs now we can only do
Right.
like 2 minute songs. We used to do songs that were like 8, 9 minutes. And the podcast, what I liked about it, it's a long form uh, format where you can start to really know somebody. Like if you only
Right.
talk to somebody for like 5, 10 minutes, you don't really know. But when you
Okay.
can do these hour-long episodes or these long-form
Right.
episodes, you can really dive into a topic, dive into the guest, dive into the issue, and tell a story. And I think that's what people like about it.
Of
And for you,
course.
I mean, it probably opens up a lot of opportunities to like do what you're saying. You're a teacher, you wanna help people, and the podcast is like an immediate way you can get out on the web
Yeah.
and start to affect people right away.
Exactly. It's a platform, right? I'm happy, you have a platform and I'm happy you're an ally because you definitely understand. So like I mean, I'm grateful that you have me on your podcast, but podcasting, I've even like had challenges as well. Like, it's podcasting is an amazing platform, but it's like sometimes, like, it's not even consistency, it's just my teaching. At times, like, I have to like make sure that my students are not failing. So many times, like, the episodes that I think I want to air on Monday doesn't happen. And
Mhm,
one time I remember there was like a whole month where I couldn't even release like an episode, and I felt horrible because I'm like, how do you do it? But then I'm like, you know what? Now, thank God we're on summer
mm,
vacation. So I'm like, I definitely have the time to get out there and podcast because you have an amazing audience. I feel like I have an obligation to my
mhm,
audience to say, hey, this is me, this is my voice, and you guys are going to listen to my amazing voice for like a whole hour, 30 minutes or whatever, and sometimes I'm joking around and I try to make people's lives like really happy. I'm a positive person and I thrive on positivity. So I'm always like, hey, like, if you guys are going to have a bad day, listen, just listen to me. Like, I have bad days, but guess what? I have to pick myself up at times and just be like, you know what? Today may be a bad day, but tomorrow's going to be an even better day. Tomorrow doesn't define tomorrow, whatever happened yesterday does not happen today. And that's how I just pick myself up, and just a lot of husa and breathing, because to deal with people as a teacher, parents,
Yeah,
it's hard.
yeah.
It's difficult,
Well,
guys.
it is podcasting
It
is a
is.
thing where
But hey,
consistency is important, at least nowadays. Like when I first started in 2016, the amount of shows I would do per week aren't anywhere near what I do now. It's just back in 2016 when I started, it was kind of new and it was just audio. It wasn't video. And maybe I do 2 episodes a month or
oh,
4 a month. But now sometimes I do 5 or 6 a week. And it's just because I've got to a place where, my audience expects it and I actually get that many people booked where, it's actually starting to, after you either
yeah.
it starts working or it doesn't work. And for me, it started to actually get to a rhythm, get to a way to get people in. And then now I have like, there's an expectation that I'm going to have at least 4 or 5, 6 shows a week. And I'm kind of like, oh, wow, what if I don't want to do that? But I kind of like, I found a way to do it. But there's a point where like sometimes like I have other things I have to do. I have other things I do in my life. So I do have to kind of balance.
Oh,
I think everybody has to balance. Like if you get to the point where like if there's something really important, like yeah, you do what
yeah.
you got to do, and you hope the audience understands, and they usually they do. So you just deal with it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, like it even got to the point there would be like times where I'm like, you know what? I'll do it Sundays and I would stay up all night. I'm like, I'm okay with staying up all night. I'm okay with like going on almost no sleep to work just to get this episode out. Cause I'm like, I it was almost like a therapy session for me in a sense, like kind of like a healing. Of course, not telling the stories because they're obviously the stories that we tell, they're not like stories where you're like, man, like this is like this story has like so much light. Like, no, they're really
Yeah, yeah.
dark stories. And thank God I have therapy for the most part because I take on people's emotions and I can be overwhelmed and I'm like, man, this episode is heavy. Like there's just so much evilness in
Hmm.
people and you see
Yeah.
that. And you're like, when you thought that you saw like enough dose of evil, something else slaps you that you're like, oh my
Find
God,
another
this
one.
is more even
Yeah.
more deprived. Like how
Yeah.
right. Like, how do you have people like this functioning in society? Like, how do they get away with things like that? And you just want to understand the individual,
Yeah, the
but
humanity, the
man,
criminality,
they suck.
the
But
criminal mind, or like the humanities, like inhumanity to humanity is a theme that you can get into. Like criminology. I was a sociology major, and criminology is kind of a subset of that sociology. But I focused on a broader point.
yeah,
But the whole idea of like people, there's always somebody that goes beyond what you thought was possible. There's always something that's like, wow, because you don't know
oh
what
yeah,
people's like limits are, and you think you do, and then you find out that certain people don't have certain limits, and it's very it's interesting to study
at all.
what people do to understand like why, and maybe try to help prevent this from happening so that people can recognize it. And I think that's what
Right.
the being able to teach people stories or tell stories, even if they're hard, I think is important, because
Yeah.
people need to be able to recognize
Yeah.
some patterns. And if you actually show some pattern, maybe somebody will see something and they're like, oh, I'm actually inside something like that, and that's beneficiary to actually help somebody.
Yeah, and they always have like new like theories like developing. Like I love sociology, like in sociology, criminology, like there's always new like theories emerging. And I feel like many times I feel like because many of us are processing the information forward. So a lot of therapists now they know like they can play around with some theories and come up like me. I had no idea what trauma bonding was at all.
Mhm,
And this was like a new thing that was introduced to me. Like my therapist introduced this to me in my healing. And I remember that I got like the definition, not to misquote, but according to the sandstonecare.com, which these are like the stages and the way you can recover, but it's a bond and it's an unhealthy one and it's an attachment that develops from a cycle of physical and or like emotional trauma and is followed by positive reinforcement. And I was living this with
mhm.
Nathan. right? Because even though all these horrific things, right? They say the things that you want to hear. And in that moment, for some reason, you don't see this person as a monster. And it sounds crazy. I know it does. But to you, it's like, man, like he could be so sweet, so nice.
Mhm.
Wow, look, he got me flowers. He's so caring because they show you this care, but it's a deception. It's a smoke and mirrors, but it's for you to forget, right? And
Forget about the
many
really
times it's like,
yeah,
don't ever forget
horrendous
because you're
thing.
not acknowledging your own trauma.
Yeah, could you mention, like, the
Yeah,
multiple horrendous things he did,
yeah.
but
So it's like,
then you'd have a moment where you like, "Oh, he did
yeah,
this thing where he's sweet, or he seems vulnerable, or you seems okay, or seems like somebody you can work with," and then suddenly you're on the floor and, like, you can't work with it. It's like, "What is this?" You're like,
yeah,
you're getting attacked, and then it's like so I think that kinda keeps
right,
you off guard.
right. And in that,
It's keeping
right,
you off guard, right? It's kinda like, the
yeah,
unpredictability of
yeah,
how they're gonna be, that's part of the whole trauma, right?
yeah. Yeah, it's meant to confuse you. And it's like you can only hold on to that like like in the moment. You know, whenever something good happens to you positive, you hold on to that feeling in the moment. And then like when I'm on the floor thinking, man, like he's abusing me in that moment, I'm thinking he's a monster. Like everything is like coming to me like I should leave this person. He's not good to me. I should have been I should have been strong enough to leave, but it's just like I said, many times I try to leave, honestly. But like I said, this was me never acknowledging my trauma, and I was only 18 years
Yeah.
old, but it really made me who I am. And this is the experience that I have. So now I've recognized like red flags. I'm like, oh, I know what to look for. What's a healthy relationship versus an unhealthy relationship.
Well, I
So
think it's really positive that
it's
you
there,
eventually
and you
it's real
learn.
positive that you got to therapy. Like, your family didn't believe in it. You didn't, like, really know how to process it, because if you don't have family making you feel that that's a normal process, then you tend to think there's a lot of people who think, well, a psychologist, oh, that's like what? That's like something that's not real. See, a lot of people that will think because of their family,
Right,
because of their spirituality, like, I can solve it with my spiritual leader, I can solve it at church, I can solve it with my mom and my dad, I can solve it by not talking about it,
right,
and they kind of like
right,
put it off. It's like that's not real. That's not a real thing. And eventually, when you survive traumatic events, people end up looking for life coaches, they look for mentors, they look for therapists, they look for doctors to help them, because they start to realize that whatever was not working, you're doing the same thing over and over is not going to fix it. That you have to find some new path, right?
insanity. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it was. Like that's how I like that's what I say. I'm like it's insanity. Like it's doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, and it's like that's what it was. And you know what? And there was times where I had to be kind to myself cuz I'm like I'm done with punishing myself.
Mhm.
Like I'm done with telling me what I should have, could have, right? Because I can't change
Past, yeah,
like what
yeah.
happened, but I can change now how I want my life to be. Yeah. So it's like it can happen to all of us. Like abusive relationships, they don't discriminate, guys. You can be the smartest cookie with a high IQ. You can be Albert Einstein. And let me tell you, it's not lost on you. Like it can happen, same sex. And that was the fear, I believe, with the pandemic. It was, being locked in a home with your abuser
Mhm.
and there's no
Yeah,
help,
that's like a
which,
really dangerous thing
man,
during that time.
I can't
Dur du
imagine being in a
Yeah, it
situation
must
like
have been
that.
really bad, because we have probably a lot of
It
situations where
was.
people were
Yeah.
locked in and they
Yeah.
couldn't really go to the shelter, because the shelter was, like, not safe because of COVID,
Yeah.
then you have this situation. But I think what people gotta understand, you do have to not beat yourself up, and you do have to know, like, the past is the past, right? And don't punish yourself for the past, but go forward. If even if you like, a lot of times, if people are like, "Well, I made a mistake and now I can't
Yeah.
recover," like they think they once you everybody makes mistakes, or things happen, and just because something didn't go right doesn't mean you can't keep on trying. Doesn't mean because you're not able to get out of like an addictive thing
Yeah.
that you can't keep on trying to get out of it, right? That you don't have to just totally give up. That you can
Right.
every day,
Exactly.
I'm like a cancer survivor.
Right.
So every day I got up post cancer to me was a win,
Yeah.
right? The way I looked at it, I beat cancer. So every day I'm here
Right.
is a
Oh,
win. And other people could look at, well, today is not the best
wow.
because I'm
God bless
depressed.
you.
But when you're
It
a cancer survivor, like if you're still alive, that's a win every day. you know?
Oh my God, hell yeah. You attract positivity. I always believe like your mind is almost it's a medicine. Like your mind can heal you. And many times it's like, I'm so happy you survived. Yay. Because there's a lot of people that don't survive and cancer is brutal, but I'm happy that you're here. And I'm happy your outlook in life is awesome. Like that's the way to live. It's like, you know what? Like positivity, positive affirmations help me. And I also meditate. That helped me too. Meditation and positive affirmations every day. It can really help your like limited beliefs and really really have you like really like be the best version of yourself. Doesn't matter what's going on, doesn't matter if this person is being shitty to you. Guess what? Don't let this person be anything in your life other than that, right? you
Mhm.
you 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 don't ever let it hinder your progress. You move on, right? You move on and you continue because life continues and you're here. We all have a
Well,
purpose, I
nobody
believe,
can yeah.
and you have a
Yeah, we gotta let
purpose.
people not
This
control your
podcast.
mind, like, once you realize that you can control your own mind,
Yeah.
you can control your body, you can control your heart and, like, your soul kind of
Yeah.
purpose, and you start to realize, like, even though somebody told you, like, "You'll never end up amount to anything," right? Or, "You can't be a musician," or, "You can't be an engineer," or, "You can't do this." Then if you say, "Well, like, I don't care what they think, it's what I think that's important." Like I feel like, I could be an engineer. I
Yeah.
could do this. I could do it. But if you listen to what they said,
Yeah.
you let that control you. You don't have to let that control
Yeah.
you. You can go and keep on. And just because you have steps on the
I
path that you might slip a little bit doesn't mean that you can't get there. And that's where a lot of people make mistakes. They think, "Oh, I got to start this whole diet all over again
Exactly.
because I messed up." But like, well, just keep on doing it,
Right.
right?
But at least you're
Yeah, you do
starting.
it. You
Right.
just start it.
Yeah. It's almost like when you're in AA recovery. Yeah, like, I know it's hard, like, you're gonna slip up, like, the thing is not to be perfect, like, perfection sucks, like, it's unrealistic to have those expectations, we're not perfect, but it's just we continue to fight every day, and the fighter in you, I believe, we're stronger than that, and whatever, don't even focus on what people tell you that you can't do, focus on the people that support you, because let me tell you, when strangers support you, oh my God, it feels amazing, even if family and friends don't. Who cares? Focus on the ones that do support you and be grateful to them, and just count your blessings.
Well, I wanted to thank you for being a guest. We actually hit the hour mark, and that's usually where we end up finalizing it. But we have had a great discussion. I want people to go to your website that we have below there, and that will be clickable when we're fully published. And if people go to your site, what can they find there?
I'm sorry,
The
repeat that?
link we have for you that we have on the screen right now, like the sites.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what would people find there if they click it?
Yeah. That's going to take them directly. Yeah. So they'll find my podcast on it. It's called MBP for Murder, Blood, and Psychopaths. And I talk about not only my abusive relationship, I do have a twin sister that also talks about it. And I would love for you guys to go on there and listen to our stories and just support us. And thank you so much for listening to us. And thank you so much. But that's what you guys would definitely find on that link that's right
Well,
below.
thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. I think it's great that we get to hear your story because it's a story that maybe is hard to hear for some people, but people need to listen to things. They're all always like the things that make you comfortable. Sometimes you need to as an artist, I always find I have to put myself in an uncomfortable place to progress. And some people like to be in the comfort zone, but that's not kind of where I live. I
Yeah,
have
me
to
too.
go into places where it's not always comfortable, but that's where you grow. Because if you just if you're just happy all the time, it's like if you're just stable and you're just doing the same thing, like, eventually you find out you're really not happy because you got to
Yeah.
challenge yourself. And I think it's good to have different points of view and to hear
Yeah.
everything that's out there. So I know this is
Yep.
a heavy topic, but I think people should get into it.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's conversations I had to get uncomfortable with, but it makes you have an open mind. And I'm like, you know what? I can see this person's view where they're coming from, you know? Because many times we only accept our view to be the only one. And no, I love like hearing other people's view. I may not agree, but I can at least I can respect your views. We can have different views. It's fine, you know? We're
Yes.
humans.
Well, thank you
But
again, and have a great night.
yeah.
Um, so this again will be
Thank you,
available
you too.
everywhere but podcasts are listened to. We're on multiple platforms: Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook. This will be on Facebook and YouTube. It's been live. The permanent links will be available shortly. I'll get those right to you, and we'll have a landing page for your fans to listen to all the different platforms. We're on like 14, 15 platforms, and we'll get that to you tomorrow. But we'll get the Facebook and YouTube to you right now, post publishing. So thank you for being on the show tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I so